Number 1. Alex Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh, a former South Carolina attorney, was found guilty on March 2, 2023, for the murders of his wife, Maggie, and son, Paul, committed on June 7, 2021, at the family's property in Islandton. Investigators determined both victims were shot multiple times with different firearms. Murdaugh initially denied being at the scene, but cell phone data and video evidence placed him there minutes before the killings. The prosecution argued the motive was to distract from his financial crimes, which involved embezzling millions from clients and his law firm. Following a 6-week trial, Murdaugh was convicted and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole. Later that year, he pleaded guilty to 22 state and federal financial fraud charges and received an additional 40-year concurrent sentence with restitution orders totaling $8.7 million. His appeal for a new trial citing jury tampering was denied in January 2024. As of August 2025, Alex Murdaugh remains incarcerated at McCormick Correctional Institution, serving life without parole. Number 2. Jeremiah T. Byrd. Jeremiah T. Byrd was 18 when he was sentenced in May 2025 for the murder of 16-year-old Gay Meepaw near Ben Hawes Park in Owensboro, Kentucky. The incident occurred in June 2023 on Willett Road, where Byrd, then a juvenile, shot Paw in the head after a breakup dispute. Deputies arrested him shortly after the shooting and charged him with murder, tampering with physical evidence, and possession of a handgun by a minor. During interrogation, Byrd admitted to the shooting, though his recorded statement was later ruled inadmissible after detectives failed to honor his request for an attorney. In March 2025, he pled guilty under a plea agreement to avoid trial. During sentencing at Daviess Circuit Court, Byrd remained silent as the judge imposed a total sentence of 25 years in state prison. He offered no formal final statement. As of August 2025, Jeremiah T. Byrd is serving his sentence at a Kentucky Department of Corrections facility, having served 2 months with parole eligibility after 12.5 years. Number 3. Greg Delgado. Greg Delgado, aged 36, was charged with the February 21, 2020 shooting death of Luis Guerrero in the 200 block of Darby, San Antonio. Guerrero was driving his truck when Delgado shot him, causing the vehicle to crash into a utility pole. Witnesses reported Delgado fleeing the scene with a rifle. When confronted by police, he exchanged gunfire before escaping into a nearby neighborhood where he was later arrested without injury. Evidence tied him directly to the murder and firearm. In 2023, Delgado entered a plea agreement, admitting to murder with a deadly weapon, attempted capital murder of a police officer, aggravated assault against public servants, possession of narcotics, and possessing a weapon while jailed. Judge Velia Meza sentenced him to 50 years, with sentences running concurrently. He displayed minimal emotion during sentencing. As of August 2025, Greg Delgado remains incarcerated in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, having served 2 years of his 50-year term, eligible for parole after 25 years.
Number 1. David Adam Pate. In October 2013, in Lancaster, South Carolina, 25-year-old David Adam Pate murdered 33-year-old Ricky James. The incident occurred in a wooded area near Pate's residence. Ricky James, a black man, had met Pate shortly before the attack. The two reportedly shared wine together, unaware of what was to come. David Pate, already known to law enforcement for prior convictions, including burglary, had been released from prison earlier. He was also visibly affiliated with white supremacist ideologies, as indicated by multiple tattoos, including one of the word Satan across his face, and the number 974 associated with the White Power Gang gangster disciples tattooed on his neck. Pate also had a split tongue and a history of violent tendencies. According to Pate's later confession, he lured James into the woods with wine and attacked him with a butcher knife. He described the knife as being just like the one Michael Myers used in Halloween. Without provocation, he brutally used the knife on James 39 times. He later told investigators he wanted to cut his dadgum head off. During the taped interview, he stated that he just pulled the knife out and stick it on him. He went on to say that he remembered the details on purpose because he enjoyed it. After murdering James, Pate attempted to dispose of the body by dragging it with rope from neck to ankles toward a creek. However, he later said he was too drunk and tired to finish the task. Instead, he left the body concealed under brush and debris. He returned the next day to cover it more thoroughly. Approximately a month later, children playing in the woods discovered the decomposed body. The case quickly drew attention from local law enforcement. Investigators found over 20 knives, both commercially made and homemade, and more than 20 face masks at Pate's residence. DNA evidence from the scene linked him directly to the murder. In addition, his family members informed police that he had been covered in blood shortly after the time of the murder and had attempted to burn his clothes. At the time the body was found, Pate was already in custody for an unrelated charge of disorderly conduct. Upon being identified as a suspect, he confessed in detail during a taped police interview. He also blamed the victim, stating that it was his fault, boldly asking why would anyone go drinking and go into the woods with someone who looked like him. Lancaster County Sheriff's detective described the case as one of the most brutal and emotionless murder he'd ever encountered, stating that he enjoyed what he did. Prosecutor Randy Newman described Pate as an evil person and urged the court to impose the maximum sentence. The defense asked the court to consider that Pate had confessed and accepted responsibility for the horrible crime. However, this argument did not influence the final ruling. Circuit Court judge sentenced David Adam Pate to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He called the murder senseless, remorseless, and emotionless. As of May 2025, David Adam Pate has served 11 years in prison. He was 25 years old at the time of the murder. Due to the life sentence without parole, he is not eligible for release and will remain incarcerated for life. Number 2, Joseph Ferlazzo. Joseph Ferlazzo was 41 years old when he committed a violent and deeply disturbing crime against his 22-year-old wife, Emily Jean Ferlazzo, during a trip to celebrate their first wedding anniversary. The couple, who had married just a year earlier, lived in a small bus they had converted into a mobile home. They traveled from their residence in Northfield, New Hampshire, to Bolton, Vermont, where they parked their camper near an Airbnb occupied by Joseph's sister and her boyfriend. According to the affidavit and Joseph's own confession, the incident occurred early on the morning of October 16, 2021. The couple had an argument inside their camper. Joseph later told investigators that Emily began punching and kicking him before lying down. Roughly 5 to 10 minutes after the argument ended, Joseph retrieved a firearm, climbed on top of her, and shot her twice in the head while she was lying on the bed. He claimed to have had an anxiety attack following the shooting, and then moved Emily's body to the camper's bathroom. The following morning, Joseph went to breakfast with his sister and her boyfriend in Waterbury, leaving Emily's body inside the camper. Afterward, he drove the camper to the property of a friend in St. Albans, Vermont, approximately 60 miles away. He remained there for the next several hours. Between 12 to 15 hours after the shooting, Joseph used a handsaw to dismember Emily's body and carefully separating her parts. He placed the body parts in multiple plastic trash bags and left them in the camper. On Monday, October 18, 2021, Joseph returned alone to Northfield, New Hampshire, where he and Emily had been living on her parents' property. When questioned by Emily's family about her whereabouts, he claimed she had exited their vehicle during an argument on Saturday and planned to return home by Uber. Suspicious and concerned, Emily's family reported her missing around 7:15 p.m. that same day. Shortly after the report was filed, authorities began searching for both Joseph and the couple's vehicle. Vermont State Police located the camper in St. Albans on a friend's property. Inside, they discovered human remains, suspected murder weapons, and tools consistent with dismemberment, including a handsaw and a handgun. A severed part was reportedly visible in an open bag. While Joseph was initially difficult to locate, he was eventually found by a police officer at a convenience store in Vermont. The officer approached him and invited him to the state police barracks in St. Albans for questioning. During this interview, Joseph confessed to the murder and dismemberment of his wife. He stated that Emily was his whole world, but he had acted out of fear and panic. He was subsequently arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He was arraigned in Chittenden County Superior Criminal Court in Burlington, Vermont, where he pleaded not guilty despite his confession. His attorney entered the plea on his behalf during a video court appearance. The court ordered Joseph to be held without bail, citing the gravity of the crime and the overwhelming evidence. The legal proceedings took over 3 years to conclude. During the trial, Joseph maintained his claim of self-defense, asserting that he feared for his life during the argument. The prosecution argued that Joseph's actions were deliberate and brutal, highlighting his conduct following the murder as inconsistent with any credible claim of self-defense. On May 9, 2024, Joseph Ferlazzo was sentenced to 42.5 years in prison by Vermont Superior Court Judge John Pate. In his sentencing remarks, the judge stated that Joseph's account of the incident lacked credibility and that there was only one true victim in the case, Emily Jean Ferlazzo. Joseph made a brief statement during sentencing. He expressed that Emily was his whole world and claimed he had reacted too aggressively during a moment of fear. However, he reiterated his position that he believed he was in danger, a stance that prosecutors criticized as deflective and harmful to Emily's memory. Joseph's defense attorney requested a lesser sentence of 15 years to serve arguing for mitigating circumstances. As of June 2025, Joseph Ferlazzo is incarcerated at the Northern State Correctional Facility in Newport, Vermont. He has served just over 3.5 years of his 42.5-year sentence. He was 41 years old at the time of the crime and will be approximately 83 years old when eligible for release. Number 3. Gavin Plumb. Gavin Plumb was 37 years old when he was arrested in his home in Harlow, Essex on the night of October 4, 2023. The arrest came from an alleged plot involving the kidnapping, assault, and murder of television presenter Holly Willoughby. When officers entered his flat around 9:45 p.m., they found Plumb in bed. As body-worn camera footage showed, he appeared confused and shocked, repeatedly asking officers, "What is going on?" before admitting that the presenter was a fantasy of him, stating that she's a fantasy of a lot of guys also. Plumb had a history with the criminal justice system. At age 18, he had entered a toxic relationship he later claimed influenced his actions. In 2006, he was arrested for attempting to kidnap 2 women off the Stansted Express train using a fake gun and rope. He later told the court he was reenacting a stewardess fantasy, but also confessed that the event was meant as a cry for help to escape his deteriorating relationship. He received a suspended sentence. 2 years later, in 2008, he attacked 2 teenage female co-workers aged 16 in a Woolworth's stockroom using a box cutter and duct tape in an attempt to tie them up. He described the crime as another attempt to break free from his relationship. For that offense, he was sentenced to 32 months in prison and served approximately 16 months before being released in 2010. Following his release, Plumb became socially isolated. He described himself as housebound due to severe weight gain that led him to reach over 35 stone, approximately 490 pounds. He said he spent nearly all of his time online, either on his phone or video game console. His interactions often involved fantasy-based conversations. According to his testimony, many of those chats centered on celebrities, including Holly Willoughby, whom he frequently watched on daytime television. He referred to her as his celebrity crush and admitted to thinking about her for about 4, 5, 6 times a day. Around 2021, his conversations began to turn darker. He connected with a man named Mark through an online group centered around Willoughby. The two began chatting one-on-one, fantasizing about an abduction scenario involving the presenter. Later, he would say he regretted the content of those discussions and never intended to act on them. Between December 2021 and October 2023, Plumb engaged in conversations with both Mark and an undercover U.S. officer posing online as David Nelson. Prosecutors alleged that Plumb attempted to solicit the kidnapping, assault, and murder of Willoughby using explicit and violent language in chats. He shared video footage of a kidnap kit containing cable ties, handcuffs, shackles, and 2 bottles of liquid initially believed to be chloroform. In his defense, Plumb claimed the liquid was for cleaning a carpet stain and that the items were linked to a previous relationship involving BDSM and rough intimacy. The undercover officer, believing the threat was imminent, contacted UK authorities. When police searched Plumb's home, they found the items consistent with the kit he described online. During police interviews, Plumb acknowledged that Willoughby was a long-time fantasy, but maintained that his conversations were never meant to become reality. It was all fantasy chat, he said. He also stated that it was all a rush of excitement, that he knew that was never going to happen. At trial, prosecutors played police footage and presented chat transcripts that included degrading and violent references to Willoughby. Plumb repeatedly stated that the language was part of a fantasy world that he never intended to bring into the real world. He emphasized that his poor health, limited mobility, lack of transportation, and size made any physical execution of the plan impossible. He told the jury that he doesn't even have a driver's license, and there was no way he could get to her house. The prosecution argued that he had a clear and persistent obsession with Willoughby and was actively encouraging others to help him fulfill a violent and criminal act. He was charged with 3 counts: soliciting murder, encouraging assault, and encouraging kidnapping. He denied all charges. His defense focused on his mental health, weight-related limitations, and history of escapist behavior rooted in personal trauma. On July 1, 2024, after a multi-week trial, Gavin Plumb was found guilty on all 3 charges. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison with a minimum term of 8 years before eligibility for parole. He showed minimal visible reaction as the sentence was read. Following his conviction, he was transferred to HM Prison Belmarsh, a high-security facility in southeast London, due to the nature of his offenses. He did not appeal the verdict. In statements issued through his legal team, Plumb said he was deeply sorry for the contents of his messages and expressed shame over the media coverage and impact on Willoughby and others. As of March 2025, Gavin Plumb remains incarcerated at HM Prison Belmarsh. He has served approximately 1 year of his 12-year sentence. He was 37 years old at the time of the crime and will be eligible for parole at age 45. If he serves the full sentence, he will be 49 years old upon release. Number 4, Chad Christopher Dorman. At approximately 4:30 p.m. on June 15, 2023, deputies from the Claremont County Sheriff's Office responded to emergency 911 calls in Monroe Township, located about 75 miles west of Columbus. The first call came from a woman screaming that her children had been shot. The second came from a passerby, reporting a teenage girl running down the street yelling that her stepfather was shooting everyone in the house. When deputies arrived, they found 3 young boys aged 7, 4, and 3 lying outside the family's home with fatal gunshot wounds. Despite life-saving efforts at the scene, all 3 boys were pronounced dead. Moments later, 34-year-old Chad Dorman was located seated calmly on the front steps of the house next to a Marlin Model HC .22 caliber rifle. He was taken into custody without resistance. Body camera footage captured Dorman telling deputies that he wasn't going to hurt nobody and warning them about his dog. He did not attempt to flee or resist arrest. Deputies found no signs of forced entry into the home, and no other suspects were sought. It was revealed that Chad lived with his wife, 34-year-old Laura, and their 4 children in Monroe Township, Ohio, a small rural community southeast of Cincinnati. He was the primary breadwinner while Laura stayed home with the children, and the family also lived with 14-year-old Alexis, who was Laura's daughter from a previous relationship. Investigators quickly established the horrifying sequence of events. According to Clermont County prosecutor, Chad had planned the shooting for at least 3 months earlier. On the day of the crime, he allegedly retrieved his rifle and began shooting his sons one by one. He first shot 4-year-old Hunter. When 7-year-old Clayton tried to run into a nearby field, he pursued him, brought him back to the home, and executed him. The youngest son, 3-year-old Chase, was reportedly ripped from his mother's arms before Dorman shot him. The boy's mother was also shot in the hand while trying to protect her children. She survived and was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Her 14-year-old daughter fled the house barefoot and screaming for help. Witnesses reported seeing the girl run toward a fire station, refusing a neighbor's offer to drive her, saying she couldn't leave her family. Prosecutors later revealed that Dorman confessed during interrogation, stating that he lined his children up and shot them execution style. A detailed indictment filed in Clermont County Court charged Dorman with 21 counts, including 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault. He was arraigned in court and held without bond. Initially, he was represented by a public defender, though court records were not clear on whether he retained the same legal counsel moving forward. At his arraignment, prosecutors described his actions as deliberate and methodical. They argued that he purposely and with prior calculation and design caused the deaths of his 3 sons. The state cited the presence and use of a firearm in committing the offense, and requested he be held without bail. Friends and family described Dorman as an ordinary man with no visible history of mental illness. However, neighbors later recalled frequent angry outbursts and yelling at his family. The judge agreed. During the trial, Chief Prosecutor for Clermont County Municipal Court stated that that was the worst crime he had ever seen, indicating that his boys looked up to him for protection and guidance, and he executed them instead. Chad's father, Keith Dorman, told media outlets that the family was in shock. He stated that his son just snapped, indicating that there was something going on in his life that he couldn't handle anymore. The elder Dorman also confirmed that while his son had no recent criminal history or diagnosed mental illness, he had been charged with domestic violence in 2010 for allegedly choking him, but that charge was dismissed when he failed to appear in court. One friend said Chad had a bad temper, calling him a bomb ready to explode. However, just days before the killings, Chad had updated his Facebook profile with pictures of him and his sons, including one taken at a baseball field. According to coaches, the boys were well-liked and talented athletes who loved playing baseball. In total, Chad Dorman has been charged with 21 felonies. He is currently incarcerated at the Clermont County Jail without the possibility of bail. As of May 2025, he has served 1 year and 11 months in custody. He has not been sentenced yet. If convicted on all counts, prosecutors have indicated they will seek the death penalty. If he receives life in prison without parole instead, he would remain behind bars for the rest of his natural life. At the time of the shooting, he was 32. If ever eligible for release, though highly unlikely under current charges, he would be well into his senior years. A GoFundMe created to support the surviving family and cover burial costs raised over $251,000. The local community continues to mourn the loss of 3 young boys. Number 5. Curtis Michael Algier. Curtis Michael Algier was 27 years old when he fatally shot a Utah Department of Corrections officer during an attempted escape from custody. Known to law enforcement prior to the incident, Algier had an extensive criminal history and was widely recognized for his white supremacist tattoos and affiliations. By 2007, he was already labeled as Public Enemy Number 1, 1 inch by the Metro Gang unit in the Salt Lake City area due to his criminal behavior and threats made against law enforcement. On the morning of June 25, 2007, Algier was transported from the Utah State Prison to the University of Utah Orthopedic Center for an MRI scan to assess his back pain. Officer Stephen Anderson, a 60-year-old veteran with 22 years of service in the Department of Corrections, was assigned to escort him. Due to MRI protocols, Anderson removed Algier's metal handcuffs to replace them with plastic flexi-cuffs. During this exchange, Algier managed to seize Anderson's service weapon. Officer Anderson was shot twice, once in the head and once in another body part, and he died at the scene. Following the shooting, Algier fled the medical center, hijacked a civilian vehicle, and initiated a high-speed pursuit. Police tracked him as he drove at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. The chase ended when the vehicle he was driving sustained a flat tire. He then fled on foot into an Arby's restaurant. Inside the restaurant, he attempted to continue his escape. He pistol-whipped an employee, and in an altercation with customer Eric Fullerton slashed the man's throat with a knife. Fullerton managed to disarm Algier before authorities arrived and apprehended him. The entire incident, from escape to capture, lasted to roughly 45 minutes. At the time, Algier had already served multiple prison terms. His adult criminal record began in 1998, with convictions for theft and reckless driving. In 2000, he was charged with burglary and forgery in Utah. After multiple probation violations, weapons possession charges, and repeated parole failures, he had been sentenced to 104 months in federal prison for possession of a firearm by a convicted felon just days before the murder. On June 25, 2007, the same day as the fatal shooting, he was formally charged with capital murder, 3 counts of attempted aggravated murder, aggravated escape, disarming a peace officer, aggravated robbery, and possession of a firearm by a restricted person. He initially faced the death penalty, but he entered into a plea agreement with the state of Utah. He also entered no contest pleas to 3 counts of attempted aggravated murder. As part of the plea deal, the death penalty was taken off the table. At his sentencing hearing on December 5, 2012, he gave a disjointed statement. He apologized for the killing, but simultaneously argued that the shooting was accidental and criticized the court and his legal team. He stated that he didn't want to hurt anyone, and just because he had tattoos on his face doesn't make him a monster. Prosecutors described Eric Fullerton, the man who disarmed Algier at the Arby's restaurant, as a hero. Fullerton testified that although he was injured during the confrontation, his focus was on stopping Algier before more people could be harmed. After sentencing, Algier attempted to withdraw his guilty plea, arguing that he was misled by his attorneys and had not fully understood the consequences of the plea deal. However, the Utah Supreme Court upheld the denial of his motion, ruling that he had filed it too late. His physical appearance remained notable, with tattoos covering his face and body, including Nazi symbols and white supremacist codes. While he denied being a member of the Silent Aryan Warriors prison gang, law enforcement officers viewed him as a high-risk, ideologically driven individual. His behavior in court and throughout legal proceedings was marked by rants, profanity, and refusals to follow courtroom protocol. Curtis Algier has been housed at the Utah State Prison System since his sentencing. He was 27 at the time of Officer Anderson's murder and 33 at the time of his sentencing. Since he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, he is not eligible for release. His projected date of death is the only end to his incarceration. As of March 2025, Curtis Michael Algier has served over 12 years of his life sentence. Number 6. Joseph Czuba. Joseph M. Czuba was a 71-year-old resident of Plainfield Township, located approximately 40 miles southwest of Chicago, Illinois. At the time of the incident, he was living in a suburban home he shared with his ex-wife, Mary Connor. The couple had been married since 1994 and divorced in 2024, shortly after the events of the case. For 2 years prior to the attack, they rented 2 rooms in their home to 33-year-old Hanan Shahin, a Palestinian Muslim woman originally from Jerusalem, and her 6-year-old son, Wadi Al-Fayumi, who was born in Illinois. By all accounts, the landlord-tenant relationship had been peaceful. Shahin was described by Mary Connor as a very good tenant, and even a friend. Czuba, too, had shown signs of hospitality, bringing home toys and sports gear for Wadi, and seemingly making an effort to create a comfortable environment for the child. However, that dynamic reportedly shifted following the outbreak of the Israel-Hamas conflict in early October 2023. Connor testified in court that Czuba began displaying signs of paranoia around that time. He expressed fear that their tenants might somehow pose a threat to them due to their religion and ethnicity. He mentioned to her that Shahin needed to move, saying that she needs to move because her friends could come and do harm to them. Connor tried to reassure him that Shahin had never brought guests to the home and was not a threat. Nonetheless, Czuba appeared increasingly agitated in the days leading up to the incident. He referenced a day of jihad and expressed concerns about a collapse of the U.S. banking system, even withdrawing $1,000 in cash out of precaution. On the morning of October 14, 2023, Czuba entered the room Shahin shared with her son. According to her testimony, he forced his way in and began stabbing her in front of Wadi. Despite sustaining more than a dozen stab wounds, Shahin managed to escape to the bathroom and lock herself inside, using the opportunity to call 911. In the moments that followed, Czuba turned his attention to Wadi. Authorities later reported that the 6-year-old boy was brutally used a knife on for over 26 times. First responders from the Plainfield Fire Protection District arrived to find Wadi in traumatic arrest. His vital organs had been punctured, and despite life-saving attempts, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. Czuba remained at the scene. When police arrived, they found him sitting upright on the driveway, with a cut on his forehead. He did not attempt to flee. Officers took him into custody at the scene. According to text messages sent by Shahin to the boy's father, Czuba had shouted, "You Muslims must die," before launching the attack. The charges brought against Joseph Czuba included first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of hate crimes, and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. The Will County State's Attorney's Office handled the prosecution. The court proceedings began in early 2024. Witnesses included Mary Connor, first responders, and Shahin herself. A paramedic who arrived on scene provided detailed testimony about the severity of Wadi's injuries and the efforts made to save him. The defense argued that Czuba never expressed any specific intentions to harm his tenants, and that he had not previously shown signs of religious hatred. However, prosecutors emphasized that his words and actions leading up to and during the attack were clearly motivated by bias. The case gained national attention. President Joe Biden issued a statement condemning the attack and expressing sorrow for the victims. Czuba was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the murder of Wadi Al-Fayumi, alongside consecutive sentences for the attempted murder of Shaheen and the hate crimes. During the sentencing hearing, he remained largely expressionless and declined to offer any statement when given the opportunity. Czuba was immediately transferred to the custody of the Illinois Department of Corrections. He was processed and assigned to the Stateville Correctional Center, a maximum security prison located near Joliet, Illinois. As of March 2025, Joseph Czuba has served less than 1 year in prison. He was 71 years old at the time of the crime, and due to the life sentence without parole, he will remain incarcerated for the rest of his life. Number 7. Timothy Ray Jones, Jr. On August 28, 2014, in Lexington, South Carolina, 32-year-old Timothy Ray Jones, Jr. murdered his 5 children. At the time of the offense, he was a former Intel software engineer residing in Lexington County, South Carolina. He was a father of 5 children: 8-year-old Mara, 7-year-old Elias, 6-year-old Natan, 2-year-old Gabriel, and 1-year-old Abigail. Jones had full physical custody of the children following his divorce from their mother, Amber Kaiser, who had been unable to afford legal representation during their custody proceedings. Despite the shared legal custody, the children lived with Jones. On the day of the incident, a fatal sequence of events began inside the Jones family mobile home in Lexington. That day, Jones reportedly became enraged after discovering that his 6-year-old son, Natan, had broken an electrical outlet. As punishment, Jones forced the boy to perform rigorous physical exercises over an extended period, eventually leading to Natan's death. Rather than seeking help, he turned on his remaining children. He admitted to brutally attacking 8-year-old Mara and 7-year-old Elias with his hands, and 2-year-old Gabriel and 1-year-old Abigail using a belt. According to a video-recorded confession, Mara and Elias said, "I love you" to their father just before he murdered them. After the murder, Jones placed each of the bodies in plastic bags and stored them in his SUV. Over the next 9 days, he drove through several southern states, making stops at convenience stores, staying in parking lots, and purchasing items such as cigarettes and cleaning products. During this time, he used his knowledge of technology to search for countries without extradition agreements with the United States and researched body decomposition methods. Eventually, he abandoned his children's remains on a remote hillside near Camden, Alabama, placing them in black garbage bags. Jones was arrested on September 6, 2014, in Smith County, Mississippi, at a routine traffic checkpoint. The arresting officer noted a foul smell coming from the vehicle, which he described as the smell of death. Jones was taken into custody without resistance and later confessed to the murders during an interview with investigators. The trial of Timothy Ray Jones, Jr. began on May 14, 2019, in Lexington County. Prosecutors charged him with 5 counts of murder and sought the death penalty. His defense team entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, citing long-standing mental illness. Jones had a documented history of behavioral and psychological instability. His mother was institutionalized for mental illness when he was a toddler, and he was raised primarily by his grandmother, Roberta Thornsberry. He also suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident at age 15. Throughout the trial, multiple witnesses testified regarding Jones's behavior. His ex-wife, Amber Kaiser, described him as increasingly rigid and authoritarian during their marriage, demanding strict obedience and espousing religious views that minimized women's roles. Several former babysitters also recounted incidents of physical abuse and neglect, including the children being forced to share meager meals and being denied food as punishment. One of the babysitters, Joy Lorick, testified that she had reported concerns to the Department of Social Services months before the murder. The DSS had enacted safety plans that barred Jones from using corporal punishment, but enforcement was limited. The jury was presented with graphic testimony from a forensic pathologist, but not shown photos of the children's remains. The court ruled that the images were too prejudicial. During the proceedings, Jones showed minimal emotion, though he briefly wept during his attorney's closing argument. On June 4, 2019, after approximately 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all 5 counts of murder. His father and siblings pleaded for a life without parole, citing mental illness and a history of trauma. Amber Kaiser, his former wife and mother of the deceased children, while visibly grieving, also asked the jury to consider her children's love for their father and spare his life despite his actions. Nonetheless, on June 13, 2019, the jury unanimously sentenced Timothy Ray Jones Jr. to death. Prosecutors argued that life in prison would amount to sending him to his room, given his education, quiet demeanor, and capacity to adapt to incarceration. Following sentencing, Jones was transferred to Kirkland Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina, where inmates sentenced to death undergo psychological evaluation and classification. As of March 2025, Timothy Ray Jones Jr. remains incarcerated on death row at Kirkland Correctional Institution. He has served nearly 11 years in prison. He was 32 years old at the time of the crime. If ever granted clemency or resentenced, he would be in his late 50s by the time of release. No such appeals have yet been successful. His current status is unchanged, sentenced to death and awaiting execution. Number 8. Muhammad Altantawi. On the morning of August 21, 2017, in a quiet, upscale neighborhood in Farmington Hills, Michigan, police received a 911 call from 14-year-old Aya Altantawi. Her mother, 35-year-old Nada Huranye, had been found lying motionless on the patio of their $1.2 million mansion. At first glance, it appeared to be a tragic fall from a second-floor window. But further investigation revealed something much more deliberate. At the time of the incident, 16-year-old Muhammad Altantawi, Nada's eldest child, was home along with his 2 younger sisters aged 14 and 12. Nada was a personal trainer at the Franklin Athletic Club and mother of 3, and was recently separated from her husband, Dr. Basil Altantawi. The couple was undergoing a contentious divorce, and both were expected to give depositions that same week. Basil had previously been charged and placed on probation for Medicare fraud and domestic violence, the latter stemming from a physical incident involving Nada that resulted in a police report and a no-contest plea. The morning had started off normally, with the children preparing to leave for school. But when Aya couldn't find her mother, she checked the guest bedroom and noticed the window open, a ladder, and cleaning supplies nearby. Looking down, she saw Nada's body on the patio and ran to wake Muhammad. They both rushed downstairs as Aya called 911. When first responders arrived, Muhammad was seen attempting CPR guided by dispatchers. But it was too late. The medical examiner would later determine that Nada had died before the fall. There was no evidence of injuries consistent with a fall being the cause of death. Instead, signs of asphyxiation were found, specifically nasal and oral blockage, indicating she may have been smothered. Initially, investigators considered the possibility of an accident. Nada could have been cleaning and slipped. However, inconsistencies quickly emerged. Surveillance cameras on the property showed no footage of Nada climbing out the window. One camera, however, captured a body falling, and moments before that, it showed shadows on the grass indicating someone with short hair lifting a heavy object towards the window. Muhammad was the only male in the house that morning. When questioned, he first denied being in the room at all. Later, under further questioning, he admitted he had seen his mother that morning and handed her a cleaning spray. He eventually claimed that he was holding the ladder when she fell. But investigators knew the timeline didn't support this version, as Nada had already died before the fall occurred. Further evidence suggested that Muhammad had a strained relationship with his mother. According to witnesses, He resented her for the divorce and for becoming more Americanized, taking a job to start establishing an independent life, removing her hijab, and socializing more. Friends of Nada told detectives that Muhammad blamed her for the deterioration of the family and that his attitude had changed drastically in the year leading up to her death. Prosecutors alleged that the act was premeditated. Muhammad was charged with second-degree murder and arraigned in Oakland County Court, where he appeared by video. He showed little emotion during the hearing. The prosecution described him as a danger to society, noting the presence of his younger sisters in the home during the murder. They also highlighted Muhammad's strong family ties to Syria, arguing that he posed a flight risk. His attorney argued for bond, stating that Muhammad was an exceptional student with no prior criminal record and offering conditions such as passport surrender and GPS monitoring. The judge denied bond, and Muhammad was ordered held at Children's Village. The case moved forward with Muhammad being tried as an adult. Prosecutors leaned on surveillance footage, the coroner's report, and Muhammad's inconsistent statements. They argued that he smothered his mother possibly with a pillow or cloth, then staged the scene to make it look like an accident. The defense did not deny Muhammad's presence, but argued the event was a tragic accident during a cleaning mishap. They attempted to challenge the timeline and interpretation of physical evidence, but the coroner's report and surveillance footage remained central to the prosecution's case. Muhammad Altantawi was ultimately convicted of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison. He was 16 years old at the time of the crime, and unless granted parole, he will be 56 years old when his maximum sentence is served. As of May 2025, Muhammad has served 7 years in prison. He remains incarcerated at a Michigan state facility. No parole hearings have been publicly scheduled as of March 2025. Number 9. Adrian Oswaldo Sura Reyes. On the evening of August 13, 2022, Adrian Oswaldo Sura Reyes, a 24-year-old man from Nescopec, Pennsylvania, carried out a double homicide that involved a vehicular attack and a brutal assault with a hammer. The incidents occurred in 2 separate locations, Berwick and Nescopec, within minutes of each other. According to police reports, the series of events began following a domestic dispute between Reyes and his 56-year-old mother, Rosa Reyes. The conflict reportedly involved an ongoing financial tensions and personal frustrations. After the argument, Reyes left the residence in his vehicle and drove to Berwick, a neighboring town approximately 5 miles away. He arrived near the Intoxicology Department, a local bar that was hosting a public fundraiser to support families affected by a deadly house fire that had claimed the lives of 10 people, including children, just 8 days earlier. At approximately 6:15 p.m., Reyes drove past the crowd of approximately 75 people gathered in the bar's parking lot. He then turned his vehicle around and drove directly into the crowd at high speed. One woman, 50-year-old Rebecca L. Reese, was pronounced dead at the scene. 17 others were injured critically. Witnesses described the vehicle accelerating into the group without warning. In his own words to police, Reyes later stated that he just ran them over. After the collision, Reyes fled the scene and drove back to Nescopec. When he arrived at his home, he saw his mother standing outside. According to charging documents, Reyes then struck her with the front of his vehicle. After hitting her with the car, he retrieved a hammer from the vehicle and struck her in the head multiple times. During the investigation, he told the police that he had hit her 4 or 5 times. Rosa Reyes was declared dead at the scene. Police were called to the second incident just minutes after the first. When officers arrived at the scene in Nescopec, they found Rosa Reyes deceased and arrested Adrian Sura Reyes without incident. The vehicle at the second scene matched the description provided from the Berwick attack. Witnesses and physical evidence connected both events to the same suspect. During questioning, he admitted to both attacks. He told investigators he had become overwhelmed with frustration over his relationship with his mother and was emotionally exhausted. He said he wanted to be done with it. Charging documents indicated he specifically mentioned financial issues and long-standing arguments with his mother. Police also noted that he had a prior history of violence involving his mother. On December 26, 2020, he was arrested for striking her during an argument over a cell phone. He pleaded guilty to assault and harassment and served 12 months of probation, which had concluded in July 2022, just 1 month prior to the homicides. He was charged with 2 counts of criminal homicide and multiple counts of aggravated assault. He was denied bail and remains incarcerated at Columbia County Correctional Facility. He was arraigned on August 14, 2022, and a preliminary hearing was scheduled for August 29. Prosecutors confirmed that they would pursue the death penalty due to the aggravated nature of the crimes, including the premeditated vehicular attack on a public crowd and the fatal assault on his mother. They emphasized that Reyes made deliberate decisions to turn his vehicle around in Berwick, to target the crowd, and to retrieve a weapon after hitting his mother with his car. They also presented evidence of prior violence in the home and quoted his confession in full. The fact that he targeted a peaceful public fundraiser held in memory of fire victims added to the aggravating factors. The defense acknowledged Reyes's responsibility, but indicated that he had been under mental and emotional stress. In June 2023, Reyes entered a guilty plea to 2 counts of first-degree murder and 17 counts of attempted murder. The plea deal ensured that he would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Gary Norton sentenced him to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole and an additional 123 to 300 years in prison on 19 counts of attempted homicide. As of March 2025, Adrian Oswaldo Sura Reyes remains incarcerated at SCI Phoenix. He has served 2 years and 7 months of his life sentence without parole and will spend the remainder of his life in custody. Number 10, Joshua Amburgy. Joshua Amburgy, who was 40-year-old at the time of the incident, was living with his parents in a suburban neighborhood in Miami Township, Claremont County, Ohio. He had a prior criminal history, including probation for assaulting a police officer. Despite that, he remained in the family home due to ongoing mental health challenges. His mother, 58-year-old Melissa Amburgy, had reportedly spent years seeking mental health care and support for her son. On the afternoon of November 1, 2022, the household routine took a deadly turn. According to court records and police reports, Melissa and her husband, Ted Amburgy, were hanging wall art when Joshua repeatedly asked his mother to come upstairs. She declined. Shortly afterward, Joshua descended into the basement with a kitchen knife and brutally stabbed his mother 7 times. Ted, witnessing the attack, attempted to intervene by striking Joshua with a chair in a desperate effort to save Melissa's life. Emergency responders arrived on the scene and found Melissa gravely injured. She was airlifted to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, where she later died from her wounds. Meanwhile, Joshua fled the house carrying the knife. Officers located him in the backyard of a nearby residence on Geneva Court. Body camera footage showed a brief and tense standoff, lasting only about 12 seconds before Amburgy, who was still armed, charged at the officers. He was shot in the leg and taken into custody. Police recovered the murder weapon as well as a second larger knife from Joshua's pocket. Investigators later revealed that Amburgy had been planning to murder his mother for about a month, having initially tried to obtain a firearm before purchasing the kitchen knife from a local dollar store. In interviews, he expressed anger toward his mother and admitted he would have attacked her regardless of the location. Joshua Amburgy was charged with aggravated murder and felonious assault. In 2023, he entered a guilty plea, and Claremont County Common Pleas judge sentenced him to 41 years to life in prison. During sentencing, Joshua showed no visible remorse. Instead, he questioned the public's response to the crime, stating that there was only 3 people there that day, but the case has blown way out of proportion to where the news got a hold of it. indicating that the story has exacerbated itself, and he did not understand why it did. His attorney acknowledged his client's lack of remorse, but noted that the guilty plea avoided a prolonged trial for the grieving family. Melissa's relatives, including her daughter-in-law Jessica Amburgy, addressed the court saying that he murdered the one person who fought for him the hardest. Joshua's mental health history was a key aspect of the defense's argument. Although found competent to stand trial, he had long struggled with serious psychological conditions. However, the court ruled him ineligible to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. At one point, the judge had even threatened to have Joshua muzzled in court. As of late 2024, Joshua Amburgy remains incarcerated at the Clermont County Jail without bond while awaiting a possible retrial. Prosecutors maintain that the murder was premeditated and deliberate. Joshua also stated in court that he wasn't a menace to the society, stating that he deserves a chance. If reconvicted and resentenced under similar terms, Joshua Amburgy would be eligible for parole at the age of 81, having committed the crime at age 40. As of March 2025, Joshua Amburgy has served just over 2 years in custody. He remains detained at the Clermont County Jail, awaiting further legal proceedings and a potential retrial. He is not currently serving time in a state correctional facility due to the vacated conviction. His final prison status is pending the outcome of new court decisions. Number 11. Isaac Nathaniel Christenbury. On October 22, 2024, 28-year-old Isaac Nathaniel Christenbury drove to a home on P.J. McCree Road in Maiden, North Carolina, where he shot and murdered 28-year-old his ex-girlfriend Jenna Cox and her parents, Charles and Cindy Cox, both 61 years old. The shootings occurred in the presence of Jenna's 10-year-old son, who was not physically harmed, but witnessed the killings. Investigators later learned that Jenna Cox had ended her relationship with Christenbury the day before the murders, and the breakup appeared to have severely impacted his emotional state. According to law enforcement and court records, Christenbury left work that evening and drove directly to the Cox family home. At approximately 7:45 p.m., Maiden police were dispatched following a report of multiple gunshots. Upon arrival, officers found the bodies of all 3 victims. Each had been shot multiple times, including at least 1 gunshot wound to the head. According to prosecutors, Charles Cox was found at the top of a staircase inside the home, while Cindy Cox was located in the dining room. Jenna Cox's body was discovered outside near a swimming pool. A trail of blood, bullet casings, and a firearm magazine were also found throughout the scene. The 10-year-old boy was present during the shootings. Christenbury reportedly pointed a firearm at the child's head, but did not fire. After the shootings, the child fled to a neighbor's house for help. Peggy Beeson, a neighbor and a medical worker, reported that the boy ran up to her in a panic, grabbing a hold of her and telling her that his grandparents just got shot in the head and were dead. Beeson checked for a pulse on the grandparents but found none. After fleeing the scene, Christenbury returned to Lincoln County. Within an hour, he called 911 and told dispatchers that he was responsible for a shooting and wanted to surrender. During the call, he stated that he felt bad for what he did and indicated that he needed help. Law enforcement found a firearm in the front passenger seat of his vehicle when he was arrested without incident along Maiden Highway. During questioning, he admitted that he drove to the home with the intent to confront Jenna after she ended their relationship. He confirmed that he shot all 3 victims. His parents later told investigators that they were aware Jenna had broken off the relationship a day before. Location data from his phone placed him near the home at the time of the shooting, further confirming his presence. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and held without bond at the Catawba County Detention Center. On February 19, 2025, he pleaded guilty to all 3 counts of first-degree murder. In exchange for his guilty plea, he was sentenced the same day to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. At sentencing, Family members of the victims gave impact statements, including Jenna Cox's 10-year-old son, who addressed the court. The judge acknowledged the child's trauma and courage, saying that he had a strength he could only hope to have, and prayed that the poor child become the best version of himself. As of May 2025, Isaac Nathaniel Christenbury has served 7 months in prison. Because he received life without parole, he is not eligible for release at any age. He remains incarcerated under 3 consecutive life sentences in North Carolina's state prison system. Number 12, Caleb Scott Anderson. Caleb Scott Anderson was 23 years old at the time of the crimes. He was a resident of Caspian, Michigan. Before the events of 2022, Anderson had a prior criminal history, including a conviction in 2019 for 4th-degree criminal assault conduct. That earlier case involved unwanted contact with women in public spaces, earning him the local nickname of the serial butt grabber. He was sentenced to 12 months of probation. At the time of the 2022 homicides, he was not under any formal supervision and had no active warrants. On August 1, 2022, Anderson traveled from Michigan to Green Bay, Wisconsin, using his 2004 Toyota Camry. Prior to that day, he had attempted to abduct a female jogger in Michigan. During a later police interview, he admitted to approaching the woman with the intent to assault or murder her. He stated that he placed her in a chokehold, but changed his mind after thinking about his mother. He hit the woman a few times before releasing her and leaving the scene. Shortly after he crossed into Wisconsin, Anderson bought a prepaid burner phone from a Walmart and installed Grindr, a dating app for men. He admitted that he specifically used the app to target men as he believed it would be the easiest way to find a victim. He stated to investigators that he had wanted to murder someone since he was 14 or 15 years old. His plan was to meet someone under false pretenses and murder them to fulfill that desire. He connected with 65-year-old Patrick Ernst through the Grindr app. Ernst lived alone in an apartment on Green Bay's west side. Anderson arrived at the apartment on August 1st. He asked to use the bathroom, during which time he wrapped a knife inside his hoodie. He then followed Ernst into the bedroom where both men undressed. At some point, Anderson covered Ernst's mouth with his sweatshirt to muffle any noise. Ernst reportedly asked why he was doing that to him, but Anderson did not respond and began using the sharp knife on him. A forensic examination later revealed that Ernst suffered 38 stab wounds to the head, neck, chest, and abdomen, along with 12 additional wounds to his left hand and arm. Some of these were defensive in nature. The scene inside the apartment was heavily disturbed. Blood was found throughout the bathroom, bedroom, and living area. Anderson left multiple messages behind. A handwritten note on a chair reading, "I am so sorry. He didn't deserve this," and a Bible verse, Psalm 23:4, scrawled on the wall above the body, accompanied by the date. After the murder, Anderson took Ernst's vehicle and drove to Alabama. He later confessed to purchasing candles, Gorilla Glue, and Febreze, before returning to Ernst's apartment for a short time. He watched professional wrestling on television and then left the state. While in Alabama, he allegedly created another Grindr profile and connected with a man named Dwight Dixon, aged 52. Anderson met with Dixon and reportedly murdered him in similar fashion. The exact details of Dixon's death were not publicly released at the time, but Anderson was later charged with murder and burglary in that case. On August 3, 2022, Alabama authorities located him in Helena while he was driving Ernst's stolen car. A statewide bulletin had been issued after investigators in Green Bay tied him to Ernst's death. Alabama authorities arrested him without resistance. When questioned, he confessed to both murders and the attempted abduction in Michigan. He also mentioned setting a church on fire, but was unable to provide details or a location. Authorities recovered evidence from a prepaid phone he had used. Among the contents was a 5-second video showing him in Ernst's bedroom. He reportedly looked into the camera and said, "I'm okay," then panned to show Ernst's body adding that Ernst was not okay. Photographs found on the phone showed Anderson shirtless, covered in blood, and posing near the crime scene. Legal proceedings began first in Alabama, where he was charged with capital murder for the death of Dwight Dixon, as well as first-degree burglary. He pleaded not guilty in a Shelby County courtroom. He remained held without bond at the Shelby County Jail. Wisconsin authorities issued an arrest warrant for the homicide of Patrick Ernst and announced intentions to seek extradition. However, as of early 2025, he had not yet been transferred to Wisconsin. The Brown County District Attorney in Wisconsin charged Anderson with first-degree intentional homicide. Because the Wisconsin case remained unresolved due to Anderson's presence in Alabama, no trial date was set in Wisconsin during the initial years of incarceration. During the Alabama proceedings, Anderson did not publicly show strong emotion in court. He did not apologize directly to the victims' families. His attorney submitted a mental health evaluation request, citing his long-standing homicidal ideation dating back to adolescence. However, no formal insanity plea was filed by early 2025. He remained quiet as the judge handed down a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the murder of Dwight Dixon. As a result, he was formally transferred to Holman Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison in Alabama, known for housing inmates with life sentences and death row cases. As of March 2025, Caleb Scott Anderson remains incarcerated at Holman Correctional Facility in Alabama. He has served approximately 2 years and 7 months of his life sentence without parole. He was 23 at the time of the crimes. He will remain in prison for life and is not eligible for release. Number 13, Stephen Port. Stephen Port was 41 years old when he committed a series of crimes that would eventually place him among the most notorious serial killers in Britain. Born and raised in Dagenham, Essex, Port came from a working-class family. He was described as a quiet child. He left school at 16 and trained as a chef, working in various catering roles, including a canteen chef at a bus depot in West Ham. He lived alone in a modest one-bedroom flat in Cook Street, Barking. Port identified as a gay man in his 20s and maintained a reserved personality, though he led an increasingly private and deceptive life online. Between June 2014 and September 2015, Port used gay dating apps like Grindr to target young men primarily in their early 20s. He had a preference for twinks, boyish, slim, young-looking men. After arranging to meet them, he would surreptitiously spike their drinks with a substance, a potent sedative. Once they were unconscious, he assaulted them, and in 4 known cases, he administered fatal doses of the substance, leading to their deaths. His first known victim was Anthony Walgate, a 23-year-old fashion student from Hull. He was found propped against a wall outside Port's Barking flat on June 19, 2014. Port had intoxicated and assaulted Walgate before disposing of the body. He initially called 999, anonymously claiming to have found a stranger unconscious. Police later discovered inconsistencies in his story and charged him with perverting the course of justice. He was jailed briefly in March 2015 and released 3 months later on license. Despite this arrest, Port was not investigated for murder. While on bail and after his release, he committed further murders. On August 28, 2014, Gabriel Kovari, a 22-year-old originally from Slovakia and briefly living with Port, was found dead in the grounds of St. Margaret's Church, just 500 meters from Port's home. Less than a month later, on September 20, 2014, 21-year-old Daniel Whitworth was also found dead in the same churchyard. Port had planted a fake note in Whitworth's hand, falsely suggesting Whitworth had accidentally murdered Kovari and then hurt himself out of guilt. The note, never authenticated, was accepted at face value by police, and no further inquiry was made. The fourth and final murder occurred on September 13, 2015, when Port met 25-year-old Jack Taylor through the Grindr app. Taylor was found dead in the same churchyard. His death was initially ruled non-suspicious despite similarities with the previous cases. Taylor's family grew suspicious and began independently researching the circumstances of his death. They found media coverage of other unexplained deaths in the same area and alerted police. This led investigators to re-examine the pattern and finally connect the cases. Port was arrested on October 15, 2015. During the investigation, it was revealed that he had used multiple online profiles and aliases to meet victims. He had also committed assaults on several other men who survived. Evidence presented in court showed that Port had an obsession with unconscious intimacy known as sleepy play. His laptop and browsing history showed searches for such videos and fantasies involving incapacitated partners. At trial, which began at the Old Bailey in October 2016, Port faced 29 charges involving 11 victims. These included 4 counts of murder, 3 of assault cases, 7 of administering a substance with intent, and 3 of intimate assault. The jury returned unanimous guilty verdicts on most of the charges, including the murders of Gabriel Kovari, Daniel Whitworth, and Jack Taylor. The murder of Anthony Walgate was decided by a majority verdict. Port was also convicted of multiple assault offenses against other men who had survived his attacks. Stephen Port was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, meaning he will never be eligible for parole. He showed no emotion during sentencing. As he was led from the dock, family members of the victims shouted insults at him while others wept or applauded. Some described him as a sick and twisted human being, while others expressed relief that he could no longer harm anyone else. Port has never admitted guilt. During the trial, he denied all charges and claimed that the deaths were the result of consensual encounters and accidental overdoses. In his only notable courtroom behavior, he was seen smirking during parts of the trial and remained largely silent. Stephen Port is currently serving his sentence at HM Prison Belmarsh, a high-security facility in southeast London. He has served approximately 9 years in prison as of June 2025. Given his whole life order, Port, who was 41 at the time of sentencing, will grow old and die in prison. Number 14, Mark Douglas Hacking. On July 19, 2004, 28-year-old Mark Douglas Hacking reported his 27-year-old wife, Lori K. Soares, Hacking missing in Salt Lake City, Utah. Mark claimed Lori had gone jogging early that morning at Memory Grove Park and never returned. At the time, Lori was 5 weeks pregnant, and the couple was preparing to relocate to North Carolina, where Mark had told her he had been accepted to medical school. Within days, what initially appeared to be a missing person case unraveled into a homicide investigation. Mark called Lori's workplace at Wells Fargo shortly after 10 a.m. to ask if she had come in. When told she hadn't, he claimed she had gone jogging around 5:30 a.m., but hadn't come back. He then called the Salt Lake City Police Dispatch to report her missing. Lori's car was later found parked near the park entrance, but there was no sign of her. Over the next 24 hours, Lori's family organized search efforts. Friends, relatives, and volunteers blanketed the city with missing posters. At the same time, Mark began exhibiting erratic behavior. He was soon hospitalized at a psychiatric unit after being found wandering with no clothes except for sandals near a Salt Lake City motel. By July 22, 2004, Mark's father publicly revealed that his son had lied about graduating from college and never applied to medical school. Lori discovered this on July 16th, when she called the University of North Carolina to inquire about Mark's enrollment. Her co-workers reported that she was visibly distressed and left work early. Mark reportedly fabricated another story about a computer error, and the two later attended a social gathering together that evening. The argument resumed on July 18th. According to court documents, after a confrontation about his deception, Mark waited until Lori was asleep and retrieved a .22 caliber rifle. Around 1 a.m. on July 19, 2004, he shot her in the head while she slept in bed. He then wrapped her body in garbage bags and a bloodied portion of the mattress. Around 2 a.m., he disposed of her body in a commercial dumpster. The next day, he bought a new mattress, which was later verified via a store receipt and security camera footage. Lori's keys found in the couple's apartment, and the positioning of her car seat adjusted for a much taller person, contradicted Mark's claim that she drove herself to the park. Inside the apartment, police discovered a bloody knife in the nightstand, the box spring without a mattress, and blood evidence. Surveillance footage placed Mark disposing of evidence at various locations, including a church dumpster and a convenience store. A mattress matching their box spring was recovered from a hospital dumpster near Mark's workplace. On July 24th, Mark confessed to his brothers Scott and Lance hacking while in the psychiatric facility. The next day, they reported the confession to authorities. Mark was arrested on August 2nd, 2004, and charged with first-degree murder and 3 counts of obstruction of justice. Bail was initially set at $500,000 and later raised to $1 million. A 2-month landfill search followed. On October 1, 2004, Lori's remains were located at the Salt Lake County landfill. Her skull bore evidence of a gunshot wound to the head. The discovery closed the missing persons investigation. On April 15, 2005, Mark Hacking pleaded guilty to first-degree murder before Judge Denise Lindbergh in Utah's 3rd District Court. Prosecutors stated that Lori's murder was premeditated and rooted in Mark's desire to prevent her from discovering the full extent of his lies about his education and career plans. The defense presented no alternative version, but confirmed Mark's cooperation after his confession. He was sentenced to 6 years to life in prison. Under Utah law at the time, parole eligibility begins after serving the minimum 6 years, but release is not guaranteed. As of May 2025, Mark Hacking has served just over 20 years in prison. Mark Hacking was 28 at the time of the crime. If granted parole at a future hearing, he would be in his late 50s or older at the time of potential release. Number 14, Kandawaswika Kahari. In March 2023, Reynoldsburg police were called to conduct a welfare check at the home of Susan Ramberg after she had not been seen or heard from in weeks. When officers arrived, they found her 10-year-old son alone inside the house. The boy revealed to officers that his mother had been dead for some time and that her body was in the garage stored in the trunk of a vehicle. Police entered the garage and discovered Susan's decomposing body in the SUV parked inside. The investigation quickly identified Susan's boyfriend, Kandawaswika Kahari, as the prime suspect. Kahari had been in a relationship with 37-year-old Susan Ramberg, a mother of 1. By early 2023, Kahari had been living with Susan and her 10-year-old son in Reynoldsburg, a suburb of Columbus. To outsider, Kahari may have appeared as a quiet man, but his relationship with Susan had become increasingly volatile. The child told police that Kahari had physically assaulted both him and his mother. He recalled that he had made what he described as a bed in the trunk of the vehicle for his mother and repeatedly checked on the boy in the weeks following the attack, bringing him food while leaving him alone in the home, with his mother's corpse nearby. According to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, Kahari and Ramberg had gotten into an argument in the garage. During the confrontation, Kahari punched Susan and choked her until she lost consciousness. He then struck the 10-year-old child with a small shovel, knocking him out. The prosecutor stated that Susan was still alive after the initial assault. After regaining consciousness, she was helped into the house by Kahari, who placed her on the couch. Sometime afterward, Kahari choked her a second time until she became unresponsive and ultimately died. He then involved the child further by having him help carry Susan's body to the vehicle under the pretense that she was being taken to a hospital. He later informed the child that his mother was dead, but continued to care for him in a limited way, returning occasionally to feed him and check on him. For nearly 3 weeks, the child lived alone in the home, knowing his mother's body was in the garage. Eventually, Kahari confessed what had happened to his parents, who then contacted Reynoldsburg police. This confession led to his arrest. During questioning, Kahari admitted to the assault. The timeline presented by investigators matched the child's testimony and the forensic evidence from the scene. The body's state of decomposition confirmed that Susan had been dead for several weeks before discovery. The child's injuries also supported his account of the assault. In December 2024, nearly 2 years after the murder, he pleaded guilty to charges including aggravated murder, felonious assault, and gross abuse of a corpse in the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas. During sentencing in March 2025, victim impact statements were presented by Susan's family. They described the intense psychological trauma suffered by the child, emphasizing the prolonged exposure to the crime and the fear he lived in during the weeks following his mother's death. They stated that the child should never have to hug his dead mother, put her in the car with her murderer, or should never have to play dead while laying in his own blood, so his mother's murderer will stop kicking him. One family member said in court that he should never have been left alone in a house for 3 weeks, where he knows his mother's body is in the garage. The presiding judge called the case one of the most horrific murders that he has ever encountered while on the bench, citing the emotional and physical toll on the child as a major factor in determining the sentence. Kahari was sentenced to 39 years to life in prison. As of May 2025, Kandawaswika Kahari has served approximately 1 year and 2 months in prison. He will be eligible for parole after serving the minimum sentence. His exact age at the time of the crime has not been publicly confirmed, but if granted parole at the end of his 39-year term, he will likely be in his late 60s or older at the time of potential release. Number 15. Colin Jeffery, CJ, Haynie. On January 17, 2020, in the small city of Grantsville, Utah, 16-year-old Colin Jeffery, CJ Haynie, carried out a premeditated killing spree in his family's home. The attack resulted in the deaths of his mother, 52-year-old Consuelo Alejandra Haynie, 15-year-old his sisters, Alexis Haynie, and 12-year-old Milan Haynie, and his 14-year-old brother, Matthew Haynie. His father, Colin Haynie, was also shot but survived the encounter. At the time of the murders, his oldest brother, Danny Haynie, was not at home and was unharmed. CJ Haynie executed the murders over a period of approximately 5 hours. According to court documents, CJ waited for each family member to return home individually. He then shot them one by one in separate areas of the house to prevent them from seeing one another or realizing what was happening. His father, the final intended victim, arrived home later that evening. When he entered the house, CJ shot him in the leg. Despite his injury, the father managed to wrestle the gun away from his son and subdue him until law enforcement arrived. During the struggle, CJ admitted that he had planned to murder everyone in his family and then burn the house down in an attempt to create a clean slate and start a new life. CJ was a teenager, described by acquaintances as socially awkward and isolated. He had no criminal history, did not use hard substance, and had been struggling with severe anxiety and emotional challenges. Before the murder, his behavior raised concern among family members. According to his older brother, their mother had asked CJ if he wanted therapy. The father declined to pursue it, fearing that talking to a therapist might lead to legal trouble for his son. On the day of the crime, CJ first shot his mother, followed by his sister, Milan. He then waited for his brother Matthew and sister Alexis to return home from school and shot each of them separately in different areas of the house. The motive was partly tied to a growing sense of isolation and escalating arguments with his father. Prosecutors later stated that although CJ had a tense relationship with his father, his relationships with his siblings had been positive. Yet he told investigators that he thought if he murdered my father, everyone would turn against him, so he made a selfish decision to murder them all. This confession was included in a pre-sentence investigation report. CJ was arrested at the scene. A therapist who interviewed him reported that CJ had been increasingly isolated in the months leading up to the murders. He was charged as an adult due to the severity of the crimes. He later pleaded guilty on July 19, 2022, to 4 counts of aggravated murder and 1 count of attempted aggravated murder. Other weapons charges were dismissed as part of a plea agreement. At his sentencing on July 12, 2023, CJ Haynie, now 20, addressed the court, stating that he wants everyone to know he has learned from what he did. He apologized to the community and his family, stating that he wants others to know that they can get help for their anxiety. 3rd District Judge sentenced him to 4 consecutive prison terms of 25 years to life 1 for each murder totaling a minimum of 100 years. He also received a concurrent sentence of 25 years to life for the attempted murder of his father. The prosecution emphasized the brutality of the case and rejected the idea that he should ever be free again. The defense provided character references and presented CJ's educational and emotional progress since incarceration. He had earned a high school diploma, was taking college courses, and had no disciplinary issues while detained at the Salt Lake Valley Youth Center. Several neighbors and acquaintances submitted letters supporting CJ's character development and calling for some degree of leniency. As of May 2025, Colin Jeffery, CJ Haynie, has served 5 years and 4 months in prison. He was 16 years old at the time of the crime. If ever granted parole, the earliest possible release would be after serving 100 years, making him 116 years old at that time. Given the sentence structure and its consecutive nature, release is virtually impossible, and CJ Haynie is expected to spend the rest of his life in prison. Number 16. Logan Burnett. Logan Burnett was a 27-year-old man from Ipswich, Suffolk, who was convicted of the murder of Courtney J. Mitchell on the evening of August 6, 2024. The incident occurred around 7:10 p.m. on Burrell Road, a street in the town center in broad daylight, and in the presence of many witnesses. Burnett had previously been in a relationship with Mitchell, who was 26 years old at the time, and a mother of 3 children. Prior to the murder, Burnett had exhibited threatening behavior toward Mitchell. Their relationship had ended, but he refused to accept the separation. According to court documents and police statements, Burnett had engaged in repeated acts of harassment, including an incident where he broke water pipes in her newly acquired home and deliberately causing significant flooding. These acts were reported to authorities, but Burnett remained in the community and was not remanded for any extended period before the fatal attack. On the day of the murder, Mitchell was socializing with friends in the town when Burnett approached her. Witnesses reported that he chased her before brutally attacking her with the knife for over multiple times. The attack was public, fast, and relentless. Members of the public called emergency services at approximately 7:11 p.m. Suffolk police officers arrived on the scene shortly after and found Mitchell lying on the pavement with critical stab wounds. She was transported to the hospital but died a short time later, despite efforts by medical staff to save her. A post-mortem examination conducted by a Home Office pathologist confirmed that her death was caused by stab wounds to the chest. Following the attack, Burnett fled the scene, but was identified by witnesses and surveillance footage. He was arrested the next day without incident. While in custody, a mugshot was taken that captured Burnett smirking an image that would later be widely circulated in media coverage of the case. Burnett appeared at Ipswich Magistrates Court shortly after his arrest, where he confirmed his name and date of birth. He was not asked to enter a plea at that initial appearance and was immediately remanded into custody. He entered a guilty plea to the charge of murder, as well as a related charge of possessing 2 knives. he also admitted to a prior unrelated offense of assaulting a female special constable in Ipswich on June 9, 2024, for which he received 1 day in detention. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years before eligibility for parole. He was transferred to HM Prison Whitemoor, a Category A men's prison in Cambridgeshire that houses high-risk offenders. As of March 2025, Logan Burnett has served just over 7 months of his life sentence. He was 27 years old at the time of the crime. If he serves the minimum 25-year term, he will be 52 years old at the time of his first eligibility for parole. Number 17. Harrison Lawrence Van-Pooss. On August 23, 2023, in Minas Bay, Kent 21-year-old Harrison Lawrence Van-Pooss murdered 54-year-old Claire Knights while she was walking her dog. The crime occurred along an isolated coastal path between Short Lane and the beach. The two had never met before, and the attack was entirely random. Van-Pooss, who was from Margate, was a pub chef who had recently lost his job. Just 1 day before the incident, he had been dismissed from his position at the Powell Bar in Birchington after being caught on CCTV recording up a woman's skirt. With police alerted to the voyeurism, Van-Pooss left the area and camped overnight near the coastline. The following day, he encountered Ms. Knights as she was walking back from a swim at Minas Bay with her spaniel, Zebulon. At approximately 4:50 p.m., Van-Pooss forced Ms. Knights off the path with a knife, brutally assaulted her, and then beat her to death. He concealed her body face down in a nearby water-filled dike, hidden among tall reeds and grass. After the attack, he took her dog and visited a shop to purchase treats for it, along with food, sweets, tobacco, and a bottle of spiced rum for himself. Ms. Knights was reported missing on the evening of August 23rd. Her car remained parked where she had last been seen. Over the next 2 days, Kent police, lifeboat crews, coast guards, and local volunteers conducted extensive searches. On August 25th, her body was discovered in the dike by her son and his friends. That same evening, Van-Pooss was found and arrested in connection with the upskirting incident. He initially claimed not to know who he was and offered no information about Ms. Knights. The dog's microchip led officers to her identity, prompting a visit to her home in Upstreet. Upon learning she was missing, police escalated their efforts. Subsequent investigation tied Van-Pooss to the murder scene. Claire's blood was later found on his backpack, and various items he had purchased were located near a makeshift sleeping area believed to be where he had camped. After his arrest, Van-Pooss was held at Broadmoor Hospital under mental health detention. Psychiatric evaluations were conducted over several months. He claimed to have no memory of the incident, but later told a psychiatrist in June 2024 that he recalled Ms. Knights making an unwanted advance at him, which angered him. This account was rejected by the court as false and manipulative. In December 2024, Van-Pooss pleaded guilty to both murder and voyeurism. He appeared via video link from Broadmoor and confirmed his plea after months of delaying the proceedings through contradictory statements and feigned psychiatric symptoms. On February 28, 2025, at Canterbury Crown Court sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years and 183 days. It was determined that Van-Pooss suffered from a personality disorder, but that he remained criminally responsible for his actions. During sentencing, a statement from Ms. Knights' sister was read aloud, describing the immense grief caused by her death. The family left the courtroom when a letter from Van-Pooss was introduced. In it, he stated that Claire had not died in pain and suffering, and that he would never forgive himself. His defense argued a lack of premeditation, noting he had no prior convictions, and was 20 years old at the time of the murder. Following sentencing, he was discharged from his employment and remained under high security detention. Officials confirmed that although he had been held at Broadmoor during evaluation, his sentence would be carried out in a standard prison setting. As of March 2025, Harrison Lawrence Van-Pooss is incarcerated at a Category A prison in England. He has served approximately 1 year and 6 months of his sentence. He will be eligible for release at the earliest in 2050, when he will be 48 years old. Number 18. Sgt. Jason Flore. On the morning of August 18, 2023, at the disused car park of Crawley Railway Station in West Sussex, England, 26-year-old Jason Flore fatally murdered 19-year-old Stephanie Marie, the mother of his child. The incident occurred shortly after 7 a.m. in the presence of morning commuters and captured on surveillance footage. Both individuals were homeless at the time and had been living together in a tent near the train station. Jason Flore and Stephanie Marie, both originally from Mauritius, began their relationship when Stephanie was 14 and Flore was 21. Over time, their relationship became marked by control and instability. By age 17, Stephanie had given birth to their child. Family members described a noticeable change in her behavior after she met Flore, stating she became withdrawn and that family life grew difficult. Eventually, the couple began sleeping rough in makeshift shelters. On the day of the murder, multiple witnesses saw the couple arguing in the station car park. One commuter crossing a footbridge observed Flore being aggressive, while Stephanie appeared upset, undressed from the waist down and holding a knife. Within minutes, Flore attacked her in the chest with the 20-centimeter knife. The injury penetrated into her, causing her death shortly after. Despite the presence of commuters, no one intervened directly, though one person called emergency services. Flore did not remain at the scene. Within the 45 minutes after the attack, he attempted to flee the area while disposing of evidence, including his blood-stained joggers. He was seen walking his dog and attempting to board a bus, but was denied entry due to being partially undressed and lacking fare. At approximately 8 a.m., officers located Flore near Hazlitt Avenue East as he tried to reach Three Bridges railway station. Upon approach by armed police, he surrendered without resistance, telling officers that she did it to herself. Emergency responders found Stephanie Marie curled in a fetal position inside the tent, unresponsive. Despite efforts to resuscitate her, she was pronounced dead at 8:16 a.m. Forensic examination showed defensive wounds consistent with an attempt to fend off the attack. The murder weapon was never recovered. Flore was arrested and initially charged with attempted murder. After Stephanie's death was confirmed, the charge was elevated to murder. He denied responsibility, claiming Stephanie had inflicted the wound herself or that others were involved. During the 2.5-week trial at Hove Crown Court, the jury reviewed witness testimonies, 999 calls made from Flore's phone and CCTV footage. These included images of Flore after the attack and recordings of him discarding clothing. Prosecutors described his statements as a tissue of lies. On February 19, 2025, Flore was convicted of murder. The following day, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. Judge Jeremy Gold, K.C., presided over the sentencing. The court also heard how Stephanie had been an active child who loved sports and music. She had hoped to become a hairdresser. Jason Flore is currently serving his sentence at a Category B men's prison in England. He has not filed any public appeals as of June 2025. Since his arrest, he has shown no remorse and offered no further comments on the case. Having been 26 at the time of the crime, he will be eligible for parole no earlier than age 47. As of June 2025, Jason Flore has served nearly 2 years of his life sentence and remains incarcerated at HMP Lewis. Number 19. Christopher Stockton. Christopher Stockton, who was 38 at the time of the incident, was a former industrial worker living in Darlington. He had no previous convictions and was known to have a disabled son of his own. After his marriage broke down, he began a relationship with 41-year-old Paula Roberts, a mother of 5. He met her youngest child, Charlie Roberts, on the boy's first birthday. Stockton moved into Paula's home just 7 days before the tragic incident. On the morning of the 12th of January 2024, Paula Roberts left her home in Darlington to attend an early morning optician's appointment, leaving her 21-month-old son, Charlie, in the care of Stockton. Stockton had been off work, he was reportedly ill, and had stayed up late playing Xbox games. Within 20 minutes of Paula's departure, he called emergency services stating that Charlie had gone floppy and appeared to be choking on a biscuit. On the call, he could be heard repeatedly saying, "Come on, mate," and "wakey wakey," as he tried to rouse the unresponsive toddler. Paramedics arrived and transported Charlie to the hospital. Despite medical efforts, the child was pronounced dead the following day. Doctors determined that Charlie had sustained severe, non-accidental head injuries. The extent of the trauma was likened to injuries typically seen in car crashes, high falls, or crushing incidents indicating a violent shaking or impact. During the police investigation, evidence was recovered from Paula Roberts' phone showing photographs of Charlie with multiple bruises in the weeks leading up to his death. Text messages revealed Paula's acknowledgement of his injuries, including intentions to seek medical attention. Yet she never followed through. At trial, it was confirmed that she had suspected Stockton of harming her son, so she installed a hidden camera in the bedroom above the toddler's cot. Despite this, she continued the relationship and left Charlie in his care. The prosecution argued that Stockton deliberately and forcefully shook or threw Charlie, resulting in fatal injuries. The jury was told that Stockton, left alone with the toddler for a brief period, had snapped. Evidence included prior injuries, the 999 call, and forensic findings. Stockton told first responders, and later the jury, that Charlie had choked on a biscuit and that he had tried to help by patting his back and inserting his fingers down the child's throat. He denied assaulting the boy or witnessing anyone else do so. Stockton claimed in court that he had been trying to build a bond with Charlie, describing the experience of caring for a child of that age as new and challenging. He stated that he had never been around a young child before, due to his own son's medical needs. He denied any malice or mistreatment, asserting that his relationship with Paula had been strained, marked by her mental health difficulties and mood swings. His barrister argued that the incident was not premeditated and that there had been no intention to it, and also emphasized Stockton's lack of criminal history. The defense also highlighted examples where Stockton had taken responsibility during minor accidents, such as informing Paula when Charlie hit his head on a fireplace. However, the jury was not persuaded. In December 2024, Stockton was convicted of murder and child abuse. On 7th February 2025, at Teesside Crown Court, Mr. Justice Goss sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years. The judge described Charlie as particularly vulnerable due to his premature birth and delayed communication abilities. Alongside Stockton, Paula Roberts was also prosecuted. She was found guilty of neglect for failing to seek medical treatment for Charlie, despite evident signs of abuse. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison. The detective superintendent who led the investigation emphasized the importance of safeguarding vulnerable children, saying that if you have concerns about those caring for your children, you must act, speak out, or ask for help. Stockton was discharged from his position in the industrial workforce and transferred to prison custody immediately following sentencing. He did not show any visible emotion during the sentencing hearing. During his trial testimony, he continued to deny any wrongdoing and maintained his innocence, expressing that he felt hurt and upset over the accusations. As of March 2025, Christopher Stockton is serving a life sentence at HMP Franklin, a high-security men's prison in County Durham. He has served 2 years of his minimum 25-year term. He was 38 years old at the time of the crime. If not released earlier on parole, he will be eligible for release at age 63. Number 20. Graham John Enniss. Graham John Enniss, aged 38 at the time of his most publicized arrest, is a Tasmanian man with a long history of criminal activity and multiple escapes from custody. Born and raised in the northwest of Tasmania, Enniss had developed a reputation among law enforcement as a habitual offender with a pattern of violent behavior. His extensive record included theft, assault, and firearms offenses. By late 2015, he was already known to police, having previously escaped custody and assaulted officers during arrests in 2010 and 2011. On September 20th, 2015, a series of events in Circular Head, a rural area in Tasmania's northwest, brought him back into the spotlight. That evening around 6:30 p.m., a member of the public reported seeing a vehicle suspected to be stolen on Maubana Road. The vehicle was linked to Enniss, who was already the subject of a multi-week investigation involving thefts and break-ins across the region. His activity had drawn attention from local police and escalated to include the Special Operations Group. Following the report, police traced the vehicle to a nearby dairy farm. According to Inspector Lachlan Avery, as officers approached the scene, Enniss attempted to evade arrest by driving off-road and onto the Bass Highway. While being pursued, he fired a shot in the direction of police. Officers from the Special Operations Group responded by shooting out his tires with firearms. Despite attempting to escape by driving through paddocks, he was stopped and arrested at Peggs Beach after his vehicle was immobilized. He was taken into custody without further resistance. No officers were injured, and he was immediately charged with a range of offenses, including aggravated assault, firearms charges, motor vehicle theft, and attempting to evade police. These charges were added to an already lengthy record of prior convictions. In 2016, Enniss was sentenced to 8 years in prison. The court noted his repeated disregard for public safety, especially the incident involving firing at law enforcement officers. He was housed at Risdon Prison in Hobart, Tasmania. Despite the severity of his sentence, he made other plans. On September 23, 2019, he escaped Risdon Prison by exploiting scaffolding left behind after mural work inside the prison. Alongside another inmate, he climbed onto a roof and over a fence. While the other inmate was quickly recaptured, Enniss disappeared into the surrounding bushland, sparking a widespread manhunt involving drones, helicopters, and more than a dozen police officers. Residents of nearby Risdon Vale reported feeling unsafe, with many locking their homes and schools initiating lockdown protocols. Enniss, easily recognizable by the word "thug" tattooed on his neck, had removed his prison clothing and attempted to blend in with the terrain. He was eventually found the following day, cold and dehydrated, and hiding in the bush. Authorities recaptured him without incident, but the escape marked his third known breakout from custody. His earlier escapes in 2010 and 2011 involved fleeing a police vehicle and later a prison van outside Burnie Magistrates Court. During his trial and sentencing phases, he remained largely uncooperative and gave limited statements. He did not offer a formal apology to police or the public, and no remorse was noted during court proceedings. Following his 2019 escape, additional charges were filed against him, including escaping lawful custody and endangering public safety. These added time to his original sentence. As a result, he remained under strict supervision and was transferred back to maximum security at Risdon Prison. Corrections staff reported challenges in managing him within the prison, leading to periods of isolation and increased surveillance. His father publicly urged him to surrender during the 2019 escape, but he did not respond to any public appeals. As of March 2025, Graham John Enniss remains incarcerated at Risdon Prison in Hobart, Tasmania. He has served approximately 9 years of his original 8-year sentence due to additional time added for his 2019 escape and other infractions. He was 38 at the time of his arrest in 2015 and will be eligible for parole in his late 40s, though his release will depend heavily on behavioral assessments and risk evaluations due to his history of escapes and violent conduct. Number 21. John Allen Ditullio. John Allen Ditullio was 20 years old when he became involved in one of Pasco County's most disturbing and racially charged crimes. At the time of the incident, he was a prospective member of a local white supremacist group known as the American Nazis, who operated out of a mobile home near where the crime occurred. He was known for his visible neo-Nazi tattoos, including a large swastika on his neck. He had a reputation tied to extremism and racial hatred. On the night of March 23, 2006, he entered a mobile home in Newport Richey, Florida, that belonged to 44-year-old Patricia Wells. According to investigators, Wells had been targeted because she had a black male friend, and her son's friend, Christopher King, who was visiting that night, was also a member of the gay community. Ditullio forced his way into the trailer while armed with a knife. He brutally used the knife on Wells in the face and hands, leaving her with serious injuries. Then he turned to 17-year-old Christopher King and fatally attacked him. King died from multiple knife wounds. Wells survived the attack and was later able to testify in court. After the attack, Ditullio fled the scene and returned to the neo-Nazi compound nearby. He attempted to conceal his involvement, but forensic evidence linked him to the crime, including DNA and witness statements. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. The legal proceedings surrounding his trial drew widespread media attention, not only because of the brutality of the crime, but also because of his appearance. His defense attorneys argued that his heavily tattooed face, particularly the swastika and other white supremacist symbols, would unfairly prejudice the jury. The court then allowed him to hire a professional makeup artist, and the artist was paid by the state at $150 per day to cover the tattoos throughout the trial. However, on the day of sentencing, Ditullio instructed his attorneys that he no longer wished to hide them appearing in court with all facial tattoos visible. During the 2010 trial in West Pasco County, Patricia Wells took the stand and described the horror of the attack. The prosecution presented evidence that his motive was rooted in hate and that the attacks were intended to prove his commitment to the white supremacist group he sought to join. The jury deliberated for less than 30 minutes before finding him guilty of the murder of Christopher King and the attempted murder of Patricia Wells. At sentencing, Ditullio directly addressed the jury, stating that he was not going to beg the jury for his life, strictly instructing them to do what they do best, indicating that they should also consider his supporters who were sitting in court waiting for his verdict. Despite his appeal for compassion toward his supporters, the circuit judge followed the jury's recommendation and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Following the conviction, his attorneys announced plans to appeal the decision. In light of the public criticism over the use of taxpayer funds for the makeup artist, the defense team stated they would represent him pro bono during the appeal process. While incarcerated, Ditullio appeared on the television show I Almost Got Away with It, where he claimed responsibility for a second murder. He stated that he had murdered a homeless man in 2005 after the man approached his group while he was under the influence of intoxicating substances. However, law enforcement later dismissed this claim as false, suggesting he fabricated the story to elevate his status among inmates. No corroborating evidence was found to support his confession, and he was not charged in connection with the alleged killing. In addition to his media appearance, he continued to maintain his innocence in King's murder, even while pursuing appeals. As of March 2025, John Allen Ditullio remains incarcerated at the Florida State Prison in Rayford. He has served approximately 19 years of his life sentence. He was 20 years old at the time of the crime and will remain in prison for the rest of his life without the possibility of parole. Number 22. Basil Dylan Morgan. Basil Dylan Morgan was 21 years old on the night of May 21, 2013, when he committed the fatal crime that would later define his criminal record. Born and raised in Nevada, Morgan spent much of his adolescence cycling through foster homes and juvenile detention centers. By the age of 18, he had already been sentenced to prison for possession of a stolen vehicle, marking the beginning of a continuous life behind bars. At the time of the 2013 crime, he had already exhibited a pattern of violent behavior and associations with white supremacist ideology, visibly represented by facial tattoos, including baby Nazi swastikas and other neo-Nazi symbols. The crime took place in northwest Las Vegas, Nevada. The victim was 75-year-old Jean Moyne, a woman known by her family as a nurturing figure who dedicated her life to caring for others. That evening, Morgan, accompanied by 49-year-old Keith Smith, broke into Moyne's home with the intent to burglarize. Prosecutors later stated that Smith left the premises when he heard gunshots, only to return and see Morgan with a suitcase full of stolen items. During the attempted robbery, Morgan pistol-whipped Moyne with such force that the trigger guard on his weapon shattered. He then shot her in the back of the head. Moyne was later found dead in the first-floor bathroom of her home. Following the crime, Las Vegas police investigators traced blood found at the scene back to Morgan. A search of his residence uncovered several items stolen from Moyne's home, including a laptop, purse with $800 in cash, and keys to a Cadillac Escalade. These discoveries led to charges of murder, burglary, robbery, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit burglary. Morgan's arrest and criminal background drew attention not only because of the brutal nature of the crime, but also because of his tattoos, which included a swastika within a clover under his eye, and the phrase "most hated" across his forehead. In a prior 2016 robbery case where Morgan was found guilty of stealing a motorcycle and threatening its owner, he had been allowed to use makeup to conceal the tattoos during trial. But in the murder trial, Judge Michelle Livet ruled against the request to cover his facial ink, citing the jury's duty to remain impartial regardless of appearance. Morgan initially entered a guilty plea in 2018, acknowledging responsibility for the murder of Jean Moyne. The plea deal carried a sentence of life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years avoiding the death penalty. However, Morgan later attempted to withdraw this plea, but the request was denied by the court. Judge Levitt upheld the plea, stating the decision was made with full knowledge of the consequences and could not be reversed simply due to a change of mind. Morgan was credited with 201 days already served at the time of sentencing. His accomplice, Keith Smith, was sentenced to 4 to 10 years in prison on burglary charges in 2016. In court, Morgan appeared silent with his facial tattoos fully visible. He did not make a formal statement during sentencing. As of June 2025, Basil Dylan Morgan is still incarcerated at the Nevada Department of Corrections, having served approximately 11 years. He was 21 at the time of the murder and will be eligible for parole when he is around 49 years old. Simon Jacob Pada. In the early hours of February 8, 2016, police in Lubbock, Texas, responded to a domestic disturbance at a home in the 3300 block of Itasca Street. Upon arrival, officers encountered a visibly injured woman, later identified as Mercedes Ramirez, who told them her boyfriend, Simon Jacob Pada, had assaulted her during an argument. She was pregnant with his child at the time. According to Ramirez, Pada had picked her up earlier that night and brought her to his home. She noticed he was acting erratically, pacing and behaving nervously. When she asked if he had been using hard substance, he reportedly admitted that he did, but he took a little. Ramirez told police that Pada frequently used the hard substance. The situation escalated when Pada accused Ramirez of being unfaithful and questioned the paternity of her unborn child. Ramirez denied the accusations, but Pauda's agitation intensified. Without warning, he ran toward her and began punching her in the face with a closed fist. As she tried to defend herself, he reportedly warned her to not try and scratch him, or it will be worse for her. After the physical assault, he went into the kitchen, retrieved a large butcher knife, and chased Ramirez around the living room. At one point, he dropped the knife, but then grabbed her by the hair and threw her to the ground. While she was down, he kicked her multiple times, including in the stomach. During the attack, Ramirez managed to call her mother for help. While on the phone, Pauda slammed her into metal furniture items in the living room. Before officers arrived, Pauda took his 2 sons from other rooms and fled the home. Ramirez was treated for her injuries, and the case was quickly turned over to investigators. A warrant was issued for Pauda's arrest. On February 10, 2016, he was taken into custody and booked into the Lubbock County Detention Center, where he was held on a $100,000 bond. He was later indicted by a grand jury for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Prosecutors described the assault as deliberate and severe, highlighting not only the violence against Ramirez, but also against the unborn child. The case was further complicated by Pauda's criminal history, including a prior conviction for aggravated assault in 2003. This prior offense elevated his current charge from a third-degree felony to a second-degree felony, expanding the sentencing range to 2 to 20 years. During the week-long bench trial before judge in the 137th District Court, the prosecution presented evidence of the violent assault and Pauda's gang affiliations. An investigator testified that he was a known member of the Texas Tango Blast Gang, pointing to tattoos across his body, scalp, and legs as indicators of strong affiliation. One tattoo on his stomach read, "Certified Gangsta." In a pre-sentencing report, he denied current involvement with the group. The prosecution also played a recorded jail phone call between Pauda and Ramirez, in which she could be heard telling him that he pulled a knife on her. Despite Ramirez having signed an affidavit of non-prosecution and continuing contact with Pauda during his incarceration, the prosecution pressed forward. His defense attorney requested a lenient sentence, stating that Ramirez had remained supportive and did not consider Pauda a threat. He described their ongoing relationship and noted that she continued to bring the children to visit him in jail. On March 27, 2017, Simon Jacob Pauda, who was then 31 years old, was sentenced to 15 years in state prison. The inclusion of a deadly weapon in the charge meant that Pauda would be required to serve at least half of his sentence. As of May 2025, he has served 8 years of his 15-year sentence. His current age is 39. If he serves the full sentence, he will be eligible for release in 2032 at the age of 46. If granted parole at the earliest possible date, he would have been eligible in late 2024. However, no public records confirm a release as of March 2025. These are the 10 individuals executed so far in January, February, and March of 2025 out of the 21 executions scheduled for this year. Brad Keith Sigmon. On March 7, 2025, 67-year-old Brad Keith Sigmon, who had been on South Carolina's death row for over 23 years, was strapped into the execution chair and executed by a 3-person volunteer firing squad, a method that has not been used in over 15 years on the United States. Sigmon was convicted for the brutal murders of David and Gladys Lark in 2001. He had been in a 5-year relationship with the Lark's daughter, Rebecca Armstrong. After their relationship ended, Sigmon became obsessed with Rebecca. On April 27, 2001, he went to the Lark's home with the intention of kidnapping her. Instead, he encountered her parents, and he brutally attacked them with a baseball bat, striking each of them multiple times and causing their deaths. Sigmon then kidnapped Rebecca. She managed to escape from his vehicle by jumping out. During her escape, Sigmon shot her once in the foot. Sigmund was arrested shortly after the incident and charged with 2 counts of murder and kidnapping. In 2002, he was convicted and sentenced to death. Before his execution, he chose the firing squad over the electric chair or lethal injection, which he feared would be botched or make it feel like he was drowning. For his last meal, he demanded a last meal of fried chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes with gravy, biscuits, cheesecake, and sweet tea. In his final words, he recited Bible verses emphasizing love and mercy, and urged Christians to oppose the death penalty. Jesse Dean Hoffman Jr., on March 18, 2025, 46-year-old Jesse Dean Hoffman Jr., who had been on Louisiana's death row for over 27 years, was executed by nitrogen hypoxia at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. Hoffman was convicted for the 1996 kidnapping, assault, and murder of 28-year-old advertising executive Mary Molly Elliott. In 1996, Mary Molly Elliott was abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered. Hoffman, who was 18 years old at the time, was arrested and charged with these crimes. On January 8, 1997, a St. Tammany Parish grand jury indicted Hoffman for first-degree murder. He was found guilty and sentenced to death on September 11, 1998. Hoffman's execution marked Louisiana's first use of nitrogen gas as an execution method and the state's first execution in 15 years. The procedure involved administering pure nitrogen gas through a face mask, leading to oxygen deprivation. Witnesses reported that the execution lasted 19 minutes, during which Hoffman exhibited movements. Hoffman declined to make a final statement and did not request a special last meal. Instead, he was served the standard prison meal. Aaron Brian Gunches. On March 19, 2025, 53-year-old Aaron Brian Gunches, who had been on Arizona's death row for over 20 years, was executed by lethal injection at the Arizona State Prison Complex in Florence. Gunches was convicted for the 2002 kidnapping and murder of Ted Price, the ex-husband of his girlfriend, Catherine Letcher. On November 14, 2002, in Mesa, Arizona, Gunches arrived at Letcher's residence to find that she had been involved in an altercation with her ex-husband, Ted Price. Price had been struck in the face with a telephone and was in a dazed state on the floor. Gunches, with the assistance of Letcher and her roommates, loaded Price into his car under the pretense of taking him to a bus station. However, he didn't have the funds to give him for a bus ticket. Gunches drove Price into the desert off the Beeline Highway, where he shot him 4 times, resulting in Price's death. Gunches pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and kidnapping charges. In 2008, he was sentenced to death for the murder of Ted Price. Prior to his execution, Gunches demanded a bacon cheeseburger, fries, a spicy gyro, a BBQ gyro, and onion rings. He declined to make a final statement and did not request the presence of a spiritual advisor. Wendell Arden Grissom. On March 20, 2025, 56-year-old Wendell Arden Grissom was executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. Grissom had been on death row for nearly 20 years following his conviction for the 2005 murder of 23-year-old Amber Dawn Matthews during a home invasion and robbery. In 2005, Grissom and his accomplice, Jesse Floyd Johns, planned a home invasion targeting a residence in rural Blaine County, Oklahoma. On the night of the crime, they entered the home where Amber Matthews and her friend, Drew Kopf, were present. Grissom fatally shot Amber and shot Jesse twice. Jesse survived the attack. Grissom was convicted of first-degree murder. In 2008, he was sentenced to death for the murder of Amber Matthews. He did not request a special last meal and was served the standard prison meal. In his final words, he apologized to the victims' families, stating, "I consider this a mercy. It's going to be all right." Grissom was executed by lethal injection and pronounced dead at 10:13 a.m. Witnesses reported that the execution proceeded without complications. Edward Thomas James. On March 20, 2025, 63-year-old Edward Thomas James was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison in Rayford. James had been on death row for nearly 30 years, following his conviction for the 1993 murders of 8-year-old Toni Marie Neuner and her grandmother, 58-year-old Elizabeth Ann Betty Dick, in Castleberry, Florida. On September 20th, 1993, James, who was renting a room in Betty Dick's home, returned from a party and attacked Toni Neuner while she was sleeping in the living room with her siblings. He strangled her into unconsciousness, took her to his bedroom where he assaulted her, and left her between his bed and the wall, where she later died. James then assaulted Betty Dick in her bedroom, striking her with a candlestick and using the knife on her multiple times. After the murders, he stole Dick's jewelry and car and fled the scene. James was apprehended on October 6, 1993, in Bakersfield, California, after being featured on the television show America's Most Wanted. He pleaded guilty on April 5, 1995, to 2 counts of first-degree murder and other related charges. On August 18, 1995, he was sentenced to death for the murders. James was scheduled to be executed at 6 p.m. on March 20, 2025, but the procedure was delayed by 2 hours without explanation. He was pronounced dead at 8:15 p.m. after receiving a 3-drug lethal injection. His execution was the second in Florida in 2025. Stephen LaWayne Nelson. On February 5, 2025, at 6:50 p.m., 37-year-old Stephen LaWayne Nelson was executed by lethal injection at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. Nelson was convicted for the 2011 murder of Reverend Clint Dobson during a robbery at North Point Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas. Nelson, accompanied by 2 accomplices, wanted to rob the church, but it turned to violence when he was confronted by Dobson and his assistant, Judy Elliott. Nelson beat and suffocated Dobson to death with a plastic bag and left Elliott unconscious after beating her up. He then stole Dobson's car, laptop, and other valuables before fleeing the scene. Elliott survived and later provided crucial testimony. Nelson was arrested and charged with capital murder. Evidence, including stolen items and DNA, linked him to the crime. In 2012, he was sentenced to death. In addition to the 2011 murder of Pastor Clint Dobson, Stephen LaWayne Nelson was implicated in the death of fellow inmate Jonathan Holden while awaiting trial. He was 24 at the time of the crime. In his final moments, he told his wife, whom he married few weeks before his execution, "It is what it is. Enjoy life." Looking at the warden, he said, "I'm at peace. I'm ready to be at home. Let's ride, warden." He was pronounced dead 24 minutes after the lethal injection was administered. Regarding his final meal, Texas policy does not grant special last meal requests. Instead, inmates receive the same meal as others on the unit. Nelson was on death row for over 12 years. Demetrius Terrence Frazier. On February 6, 2025, at 6:36 p.m., 52-year-old Demetrius Terrence Frazier was executed by nitrogen hypoxia at the William C. Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama. Frazier was convicted for the 1991 assault and murder of 41-year-old Pauline Brown in Birmingham. The following year, he murdered 14-year-old Crystal Kendrick in Detroit, Michigan, during an attempted assault. Additionally, Frazier was linked to the sexual assault of 8 other women in Michigan. In 1993, Frazier was convicted in Michigan for Kendrick's murder and other offenses, receiving multiple life sentences. In 1996, he was convicted of capital murder for Brown's death in Alabama and sentenced to death. After spending over 18 years in Michigan's Alger Maximum Correctional Facility, he was transferred to Alabama's Holman Correctional Facility in 2011. Frazier was 19 years old when he was convicted. He was said to have made a few gasping breaths at first, before it transitioned to a series of sporadic breaths. Alabama Corrections Commissioner confirmed that he no longer had any heartbeat 13 minutes after the gas was first released. For his last meal, he requested items from Taco Bell, including a beefy 5-layer burrito, a chicken chalupa supreme, beef crunchy tacos, chips and dip, and a Mountain Dew. In his final statement, he apologized to Brown's family and the African American community, stating that her death should not have occurred. He also suggested that the media contact a former detective from Michigan, claiming he had made a false confession regarding the murder of Crystal Kendrick. His last words were, "Let's go." James Dennis Ford. On February 13, 2025, at 6:19 p.m., 64-year-old James Dennis Ford was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison. Ford was convicted for the 1997 murders of Gregory and Kimberly Malnery, who were attacked during a fishing trip in Punta Gorda, Florida. The couple's 22-month-old daughter witnessed the brutal assault, during which Gregory was beaten and had his throat slit, and Kimberly was assaulted and fatally shot. The child was found 18 hours later, dehydrated and covered in insect bites. In his final moments, Ford declined to make a verbal statement. For his last meal, he requested steak, macaroni and cheese, fried okra, sweet potato, pumpkin pie, and sweet tea. Despite appeals citing his low IQ and alleged intellectual disability, all were rejected. He was on death row for 27 years. Connie Ankney, Greg's mother, also attended the execution. She described it as a day of justice to see Ford executed. The Malnery's daughter released a statement saying that despite not wishing for this on her parents' killer, she had a peace of mind. Richard Lee Tabler. On February 13, 2025, at 6:38 p.m., 46-year-old Richard Lee Tabler was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. Tabler was convicted for the 2004 murders of Mohammed Amin Ramouni, a strip club manager, and his friend Haitham Zayed in Killeen, Texas. He lured the club manager and his friend to a secluded area under the pretense of selling stereo equipment. Upon their arrival, he shot and killed both men. 2 days later, he murdered 2 teenage girls, Amanda Benefield and Tiffany Lorraine Dotson, who were dancers at the same nightclub to eliminate witnesses. He also committed other series of murders in Killeen, Texas, targeting individuals associated with local nightclubs. In April 2007, Tabler was convicted of capital murder for these crimes and received 2 death sentences. In his final statement, Tabler expressed deep remorse, addressing the victims' families and seeking their forgiveness. He stated, "I had no right to take your loved ones. I truly am sorry." As the lethal drugs were administered, he mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," toward the witnesses. Regarding his last meal, Texas policy does not allow special requests. Inmates receive the same meal as others on the unit. Therefore, Tabler did not have a unique final meal. Tabler's execution marked the 2nd in Texas and the 5th in the United States in 2025. His case drew attention in 2008 when he smuggled a cell phone into prison, using it to make threatening calls, including to a state senator, leading to a statewide prison lockdown. Marion Bowman Jr. On January 31, 2025, at the young age of 44, Marion Bowman Jr. was executed by lethal injection at the Broad River Correctional Institution in South Carolina. After receiving a single dose of pentobarbital, Bowman was pronounced dead at exactly 6:27 p.m. Bowman was convicted and sentenced to death for the crime he committed in 2001 when firefighters found the burnt body of 21-year-old Candy Louise Martin in the trunk of her burned car in Dorchester County, South Carolina. The day before her death, Martin met Bowman over some monetary issue. Witnesses said that Bowman threatened Martin, saying she would be dead by dark. Exactly that evening, Bowman, accompanied by his cousin, brutally killed Martin by shooting her, severally ignoring her pleas for mercy. After the shooting, he placed her body inside the trunk of her car and set it on fire and ran away. That afternoon, he was caught and arrested. He was 20 years old when he committed the crime. Before his death sentence was carried out, Bowman reportedly ordered a last meal of fried shrimp, fish, oysters, chicken wings, chicken tenders, onion rings, banana pudding, and German chocolate cake, in addition to pineapple juice and cranberry juice. Bowman maintained his innocence throughout his 23 years on death row. In his final statement, he expressed, "I did not kill Candy Martin. I'm innocent of the crimes I'm here to die for." His execution marked the first in the United States for 2025, and the third in South Carolina since the state resumed capital punishment. These are the 11 individuals remaining to be executed. Michael Anthony Tanzi, to be executed by lethal injection on April 8, 2025 in Florida. Mikal Dean Mahdi, to be executed by firing squad on April 11, 2025 in South Carolina. Moises Sandoval Mendoza, to be executed by lethal injection on April 23, 2025 in Texas. James Osgood, execution method to be determined on April 24, 2025 in Alabama. Matthew Lee Johnson, to be executed by lethal injection on May 20, 2025 in Texas. Oscar Franklin Smith, execution method to be determined on May 22, 2025 in Tennessee. Byron Lewis Black, execution method to be determined on August 5, 2025. Donald Ray Middlebrooks, execution method to be determined on September 24, 2025. Timothy L. Coleman, to be executed by lethal injection on October 30, 2025 in Ohio. Kareem M. Jackson, execution method to be determined on December 10, 2025. Harold Wayne Nichols, to be executed on December 11, 2025. Thank you guys for watching till the end. Do you think executing these individuals is the right thing to do? Comment below.